Welcome to the metalworking tech tree of build 42.8.1. I want to focus this guide on making everything from scratch. It's close, but not quite there. Between the original idea of looting necessary materials and the end goal of taking up from a pure wilderness map, the devs are getting there one patch at a time. Yes, they move at a glacial pace. The glaciers carved out the Great Lakes. It'll be done eventually. As such, the flowchart I made for this video will be updated with each patch until it no longer has any whining about progression blocks on it anymore. Here I am. Here's a flowchart I made. If you want something prettier, make it yourself. You can edit mine, I don't mind. I tried my best to show the lowest tier tools required to build the crafting stations. This does not mean those are the only tools you can use. While the building menu as of 42.8 does not let you see the alternatives like the crafting menu does, you can generally use something within the same group like the different hammers or saws. You may notice that the metalworking requirement to reach the end of the tech tree is level 1. Yeah, that's a head scratcher. Clearly, it's something that will change in the future. You need higher levels to make anything other than the basic tools, though it's not like there's a lack of progression within the skill, it's only missing in the tech tree. As for the next disclaimer, I'm starting the guide at maintenance level 1. There's a bunch of reasons for this. At level 0 maintenance, you can't even make stone tools. Grinding maintenance without the ability to make decent weapons or tools to train it takes forever. There's even a mechanic that prevents you from getting maintenance XP when using things like stones you pick up off the ground as a weapon. Go loot some weapons that actually give maintenance XP when you swing them, I guess. The professions and traits that start you with maintenance also teach you the recipes you need to start from scratch. You'd either need to grind to higher levels in order to naturally learn the recipes, or loot recipe books. In which case, you could also loot all the supplies you need to skip directly to the top tier tech in the first place. McCoy Estate has irrelevant crafting benches pre-made if you want to liberate them from the undead horde. If you're doing some sort of no or low loot challenge run, you probably don't want to skip the tech tree. If you do not have level 1 maintenance, delete that character and start over. I recommend at least wilderness knowledge and blacksmithing as traits, probably more. If this is truly a primitive run, you, or your group of multiplayers out, should be looking at Masonry, Pottery, Whittler, Sewer, and any other trait that teaches necessary recipes. Finding books via Foraging is not fun. Grinding several levels just to make low tier recipes without the bonus XP gain from starting with a boost is tedious at best. Leveling knapping without access to mining tools is an arduous foraging journey. Take every advantage you can. By the way, we know all the forge and furnace recipes by default and they have no level requirements. However, there's a trait in Recipe Magazine that teaches their recipes. I assume in the future they will have requirements. I made a crude flowchart for grinding up the tech tree. It's in the pinned comment if you want to follow along or skip ahead. Finally, we get to start with foraging. You'll want to set your foraging focus to stones in order to find a flint nodule or flint flake faster. While searching, you can pick up a few branches if they happen to spawn in the biome you're in. These are called affinity sprites, and relevant foraging items are more likely to spawn on them. For example, stones will spawn on stones. If your biome doesn't spawn branches, switch your foraging focus to firewood after finding the stones you require. Once you have an axe, you can chop bushes or trees for branches. Trees drop saplings, which are required for a couple things. Do not forget you can pick up stones, twigs, branches, and logs directly from the affinity sprites. It can save you a ton of time. Hopefully they add a flint flake or nodule in the future. When crafting tools, remember to make the hammer before the axe as it requires a flint flake to create but does not consume it. If you screw it up, don't worry, it's not that big of a deal. You'll be grinding to knapping level 2 in order to make the stone chisel. You'll have plenty of time to make that hammer. You may need to rip up your clothes for the rags. I recommend foraging dogbane and turning it into twine if you have the time. Twine replaces rags in most updated recipes. While you are foraging and knapping, work on getting your carving to level 4. You will need to carve a wood trowel, a couple buckets, a wood spade, and if you're lucky enough to acquire a bone at this point, a bone needle. Carving is incredibly easy to level up if you're near a field like this one full of logs and branches. There's no need to chop trees down, but you can if that's your only choice. If you want to trade time efficiency for AFK leveling, grab a flint flake and 11 branches. Start by carving 4 branches into small handles, carve spoons from those, and then forks from the spoons. You can then carve the rest of the branches into small handles and pipes as it's the same XP as the spoon to fork combo. Researching the spoon teaches you the recipe for the fork. This whole process could take more than a day. Oh, you started at level 0 carving. I recommend you don't. Sure, it's one of the easiest skills to level. That doesn't mean you should flex here. You didn't take wilderness knowledge and that means the rest of this leveling will suck. Without a mining tool, there's no easy way to level knapping until you reach level 4. I'm sure that will eventually improve. As of right now, it's miserable in build 42.8. While you're grinding knapping to make the stone chisel, collect 60 limestone or grind your knapping to level 5 in order to make the stone maul. Crushing limestone and breaking large stones into small ones are your only 2 from scratch options to level your masonry. Preferably, you will have started with the mason trait, or as a carpenter. I recommend the carpenter as they start with higher carpentry and that will speed things up. Once you hit masonry level 1, mass produce stone blocks for experience. You'll need at least 110 for the tech tree if you skip the simple forge. For now, we need 40 to build the simple furnace. At level 2 masonry, craft a stone anvil, and you can pretty much ignore this skill from now on. You need level 3 carpentry and nails to move on. You cannot make nails until just before you hit the late stage tech. In the primitive case, this is the perfect time to build your house out of logs for some free levels. Nails are a complete progression blocker when starting from scratch at several points in the tech tree as of build 42.8.1. I'll point it out every time it comes up. But for now, spawn yourself a box of nails if you're playing primitive. Loot some warehouses or even a hardware store if you are not. A no-loot run player can disassemble furniture for nails without a saw. You will want to level your carpentry first to increase the chance they drop. That's really important. The drop rate at 0 is abysmal. We want level 3 carpentry to make a sack, which requires a simple loom. Hemp takes 240 days to grow and its planting window is a couple months ahead of its bad month at best. During the bad month, it'll take damage, most likely killing it. After the bad month, it turns to winter, which also kills hemp during my testing. Hemp is probably impossible to grow the intended way right now. Most survival games start in spring, so you have time to prepare for winter. Project Zomboid does not. You still have plenty of time, just not for farming. We need to make a sack to dig up sand and clay. Luckily, we can skip hemp, the plant drying rack, and the scutching board by foraging hemp dogbane. There is enough harvestable hemp at the McCoy estate to skip foraging if you happen to go there. Once you have 3 dogbane, you can make burlap at a simple loom, which requires level 3 carpentry. You then sew that burlap into a sack. It has no tailoring level requirement, but you will need twine to stitch it up. You can make thread via flax or wool and a spinning wheel, which requires nails. Making twine from dogbane is likely faster and easier. Sewer is not a popular trade to pick currently. I bet it'll become a top pick when the devs release a primitive challenge mode, as having no clothes sucks. At level 1 tailoring, you can pick thread from rags. When you have a sack, grab your wood spade to dig up some sand and clay. Dig the clay up first as you remove it from the sack to dig up more. Sand is required to be in the sack for its recipes. Clay spawns in mud around water. Grassy mud does not spawn it. Sand spawns wherever the devs drew it on the map, and as sandbanks near some water sources like the Ohio River. Check around construction sites and warehouses for sacks of sand or even sand on the ground if you aren't near water. There's a good chance you forage enough clay to skip digging it up during your knapping grind. Make some clay cement, and then make a simple furnace and primitive forge. Yes, a simple furnace, not a primitive one. A furnace isn't necessary if you're looting your materials or melting cars via welding. To power a furnace, you need charcoal. The simplest way to make it requires a spade to dig a charcoal burning pile. Then burn wood in it, and by wood I mean entire forests. The charcoal cost gets out of control fast. The requirements to make a primitive forge happen to be higher than the requirements to make a simple furnace. There's a reason to make a primitive furnace, it just doesn't apply to the game in its current patch. It's used to make iron blooms from crushed iron ore. Iron ore is not intended to spawn on the main map, so I see no reason to make the primitive furnace. You can rarely forge iron ore, and hopefully in the future it'll spawn in the procedurally generated area outside of the main map. If you do happen to get your hands on it, you can turn it into iron chunks with a primitive furnace and forge. Since we cannot realistically get our hands on iron ore, we will have to source our metal from somewhere else. Either a mod, looting, or disassembling. If you are doing a primitive run, check if iron ore spawns have been added. Otherwise, spawn some in for yourself. You can spawn iron ore rocks via the brush tool cheat in the debug menu. Personally, I modded iron ore rocks into the flint spawns so that it's abundant. In order to mine, you will need to craft the stone maul, which requires level 5 knapping to make the head. You can also make them with masonry, but that needs metal tools. There are several other tools that can mine, like the club hammers, sledges, and the pickaxe. Keep an eye out for them, as mining flint turns knapping into an easily leveled skill. This leads us into another nail blockage. You need nails to make the pottery wheel and the hand-operated press. The pottery wheel is for the crucible at pottery level 1. If you're looting, you can find crucibles in the big buildings at the rail yard east of Muldra. The iron bar mold and the anvil mold are made via carpentry level 2 and then pressed in clay at the press. Molds tend to break after a single use, so make extra bar molds. If in the future you can get the crucible in an iron bar mold without nails, you could cast an iron bloom into bars to progress. In order to fire those molds, we need a kiln, which is very easy to make. Right now, the advanced kiln has the same requirements as a primitive one, so I'll make an advanced one. Another progression block appears. You need to loot a modern lighter in order to fire the clay molds. Yet another item to spawn in for those trying to do a primitive run in the current patch. Infinitely, because you can't craft lighters. Well, you can. If you find a battery, you can research it to make a lighter with some steel wool. It will probably be hard to find batteries in a primitive world. Now that we have the crucible, we can start turning metal into useful tools. To start making tools, you will first have to grind your metalworking to level 1. Do whatever recipes you can, preferably ones that can be melted back down. I find that metalworking uses such a varied spread of materials, it's unlikely you made something useless. If you took the blacksmithing trait as recommended earlier, you can immediately start making tools. The metalworking punch is the first tool to make. There are several routes to acquire its materials, and I'll leave that up to you. If the power is on, you can use the bandsaw at McCoy's Logging Co. to cut an iron bar. Worst comes to worst, you can bash zombies or trees with an iron bar until it breaks down into the right size you need. Now that you have the punch and easy access to iron bar quarters, you can make the heading tool, then the tongs, the smithing hammer, and finally some nails. On your journey, you can also make a couple small iron bands for the wooden bucket needed to build a simple or advanced forge. This is another progression blocker. You need wire in order to make the bucket. The only way to get wire right now is looting it, or disassembling something like a fishing trap. Another item for the primitive guys to spawn in if you don't want to RNG your way into a wire. Broken fishing traps are very common when fishing without bait. The problem lies in the recipe to get the wire from it. Once you have the bucket, you can finish casting the anvil mold to build a simple forge. However, you are one item away from the final stage, the advanced forge and furnace. It does not require any additional levels either. You may decide it's worth it to skip the simple forge. Next up is making the advanced tier. Sculpt or carve a bowl if you do not have one yet, and build a butcher's hook. It requires nails. They should probably make a primitive version of it for those without access to metal yet. How can you do a cool caveman animal hide roleplay if you can't even get the hides yet? Acquire a medium or large size animal. This could be very hard for a primitive player since there are no craftable range weapons in build 42.8. You pretty much chase animals around until they get stuck on something or their pathfinding breaks. Deer are medium size and they spawn pretty often. You can run one over, you don't need its meat. Butcher it on the butcher's hook. Make sure to get the bones and carve a fleshing tool, as well as skin the head for a brain. Build a softening beam to remove the flesh and fur with the fleshing tool. Build the tanning barrel. Make brain tan with the bowl and tan the leather. Finally, dry it on a medium leather drying rack. Yes, size matters. If you have a large piece of leather, you can cut it into 2 medium pieces. Use the leather to make bellows via level 1 carpentry. You'll need 1 each for the advanced forge and furnace. Congratulations, you're done with the metalworking tech tree as of build 42.8. Yes, this is a metalworking guide and it took you on a journey through almost every other crafting profession to hit the highest tier of tech. That's kind of the point of the system, something about people working together as a village. Anyway, the only other thing we'll want is a dome kiln to make coke. You need coke to upgrade iron materials and to steel for the highest tier metal items. I made a crude flowchart to lead you through all of this, so reference that. I'll update it as new patches come out. At this point, you can grind your way through metalworking up to the highest tier gear without worry. Note, some recipes may not work. As they do not block progression, I'm not worried about that. Before I leave, I'm going to list everything that blocks progression in build 42.8 for ease of use. Iron ore doesn't spawn. Hemp may be impossible to grow. It has been replaced by foraging dogbait. You need nails to make the crucible and other clay molds. A modern lighter is required to light the kilns. There is no metalworking wire recipe. It's possible to run out of sand and clay tiles. As far as I know, they don't respawn. It's unlikely to occur in single player, but still possible. For now, it's pretty easy to mine out the nearby areas of their clay due to molds constantly breaking. Eventually, you'll be making very long trips to acquire it or purely foraging. They've been fixing these types of issues one at a time with each passing patch. Hopefully, none last too long.